Welcome back to Law and Crime special segment, Keeping the Peace. It's July 14th, 2020. We had breaking news on this show yesterday about Daniel Lee. Let's go back in time a little bit and remember that the federal government has not executed somebody under the death penalty statute for over 17 years. It was a moratorium, if you will. And a number of people were on death row just waiting to be executed. One of them was Daniel Lee. It was a 1996 event where he killed 3 people, a family, essentially, including an 8-year-old girl. It's really important to point out in this particular case that he was part of a white supremacist group, and they went and robbed this family. They were trying to get guns for money. And at one point in time, the co-defendant in the case told Lee to shoot and kill the 8-year-old girl. Lee refused and said, "I don't kill kids." And the co-defendant said, "Well, I do." And the co-defendant shot and killed the 8-year-old. Why do I mention this? Because at trial, the co-defendant wound up getting a conviction, but a life sentence, whereas Mr. Lee got the death penalty. Well, back and forth like a ping pong ball going over the net. The federal courts stayed the execution the other day. It went up to the Circuit Court of Appeals, and then the Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that and said he could be executed. It then went to another federal court and said yesterday that he can't be executed. So at 4 o'clock when he was supposed to be, he wasn't. And then the Supreme Court of the United States late last night or early morning said there was not a likelihood of a successful appeal to the Supreme Court and that the execution could go forward. And without delay, without a hesitation, without any difficulty whatsoever, Mr. Lee was executed this morning. Now, last part of this twisted permutation of this case was that the mother of the woman who was killed and her granddaughter was killed and whose son-in-law was killed had been petitioning not only the court, but the president of the United States saying, "Please don't do this in the name of my daughter, in the name of my God, and for my whole family. We don't want this execution." Let's take a listen.
My daughter Nancy and Willie Mueller were supposed to be at a gun show in Oklahoma. And the company that they work for called me and said that they had not showed up. It was like they just vanished, just disappeared. So we started searching for them. It was pretty horrible. The sheriff, they called to tell me that people answering to the description of my family were found, and I needed to come and identify the clothing. Yes, Daniel Lee damaged my life. But I can't believe taking his life is going to change any of that. I can't see how executing Daniel Lee will honor my daughter in any way. In fact, kind of like it dirties her name. Because she wouldn't want it, and I don't want it. That's not the way it should be. That's not the God I serve. Do I think the government should value my opinion? Yes, I'm as much a victim as Nancy and Sarah was. I think they should value everything I say. I'm the one that lives through it. The government ain't doing this for me, because I would say no.
Well, I got 2 great guests with me, Latonia Hines, an assistant district attorney out of Cobb County, Georgia, and a serious Gator fan. How you doing, Latonia? It's been a while.
It's great. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. And Kirk Burkhalter, professor, NY Law, professor, first grade detective, retired from the NYPD as well. Professor, welcome.
Great to see you, Bob.
Great to see you guys. I talked about this case yesterday. I got so many things I'd like to say about it, but let's talk about, if you will, the midnight decision of the United States Supreme Court. I mean, this guy has been on death row since 1996, and then all of a sudden, all this flurry of activities occurring within one day. It's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, it's back on again, and they didn't waste any time. I mean, not that there's anything illegal about that, but Latonia, what are your thoughts about this first execution in 17 years under the federal law and the manner in which it occurred?
Well, I think that we've got to all look at things a certain way. COVID has made life very strange. We're in a strange world right now about how things are being processed. And as all the court systems start figuring out a way to be able to start doing what they need to do in a normal fashion. So it seems like it was really quick and overnight, but it's been 17 years in the making. There have been a long series of appeals, and I think a lot of people didn't anticipate, especially with what's been going on with COVID, that a decision would come down so quickly, but it did. And it's not an illegal thing in a sense. It's just a little strange for us.
Yeah, Professor, something that the grandmother or the mother, depending on how you want to look at it, that woman that we just listened to, Miss Peterson, I believe her name is, stated also was that from the moment that Lee walked into the courtroom, they felt that he was guilty just by the way he looked. He was dressed slovenly. He had the white supremacist symbol on his neck, whereas the co-defendant in the case, the one who actually shot the 8-year-old girl, said, I have no problem killing a kid who was well-dressed, well put together. She said you could even see the jurors' reaction to Lee, that they hated him from the beginning. And we have a disparate result here. Now, I know we don't know the whole case, and we don't know all the aggravating and mitigating factors, but I know for a certainty, having handled death penalty litigation, that I am without question that killing a child is an aggravating factor in a case. This is why I'm queasy about the death penalty, even though I prosecuted these cases. The outcomes can be so disparate. What do you think?
But you hit the nail right on the head. There are several arguments for folks who are against the death penalty, and one is this disparate outcome based on how you dress, who your attorney is, where you're from, how you were raised, your education level. All those factors can weigh into whether or not you are sentenced to death. Now, I'm not saying that's absolutely the case here, but that is certainly an argument with regards to the administration of the death penalty. We've seen over and over that is just not necessarily administered equally. All things considered, just looking at the evidence on his face, this was a heinous crime. I don't see how the co-defendant is any less culpable than Mr. Lee here. And that's just my opinion, obviously, from just understanding what occurred in this particular case.
Latonia, real quickly, this question's for both of you, but when I first started as a baby prosecutor, as an assistant, we didn't even have a victim witness unit really per se. We really never really outreached. We never really asked them their opinion about cases. And then when I became the head prosecutor, that 20 some odd years later, completely was upended. There's victims' crimes bills and a requirement that you at least run the plea offer by the victims and try to explain the reasons why you came. Not that they control it, the state controls it, but that you're supposed to have them much more involved in the process. You as an assistant district attorney, to what level would you take into consideration the remaining surviving family member, at least one of the few remaining surviving family members, one of the closest, her daughter and her granddaughter were killed, who says, I don't want this. As part of this family, we don't want it, and the victims wouldn't have wanted it. Would that impact you at all as a prosecutor?
So just more generally, since I can't speak specifically to this case, I think what happens is this. As a prosecutor, you're going to evaluate the case. You're going to obviously go and speak with the victim's family in the case, and especially in certain states, it requires it. And you get their input. But ultimately, you've got to see that justice is served. And sometimes what it means for justice being served may be different than what the victim's family might want at that time. But you have to do what you have to do in your role as the prosecutor of that particular case. And I'll give you the example, sometimes in domestic violence cases, you'll have it where the victim does not want you to go forward with the prosecution of that particular case or want something different. And you've got to do what is right for purposes of administering justice for the facts of the case. And so, of course, you take what the victims have to say and you take their consideration, and you hopefully explain to them why you feel that you have to go in a way that they may not necessarily want you to go. But you do your job, but you must definitely have to speak with them and get their input.
Yeah, thank you, Latonia. Professor, agreed with all of that, but in the end, the prosecutor has the power and the ability to be able to make this decision. And getting back to the death penalty, one of the reasons I'm against it is there are issues with regard to lawyering. There are issues with regard to who the judge is. I remember in New Jersey when they had the death penalty, although nobody got executed in the state and it's now abolished, it was very clear that there were more death sentences given in one county versus another county. We used to call them, that's a death county, that's a not death county, depending on who your jury pool is, and all these factors are concerns. But what do you think about, in addition to the disparateness of it, the fact that this woman, just as a person, as a human being, if you were a prosecutor, is asking in her old age, please don't do this? Would she rather him spend life, she said at one point, life in jail, like I have to spend life every day thinking about what happened to them. He can think about what he did to them.
Well, the answer goes to 2 points. And the first one is that the first point is one that Latonia made so eloquently, that it's about justice. And then what is the notion of justice in this jurisdiction? Is it about retribution, an eye for an eye? Is it about restoration? Is it about giving the victim some closure? So first you have to identify what is your definition of justice? What is the notion of justice? And there is no one size that fits all. Finally, the other issue here is that in the criminal justice system, the victim is not the plaintiff. The victim is just that. The people are the plaintiff. Mm-hmm. So while we do take into account victims' impact statements and what they wish, at the end of the day, this is a crime against the people and not the victim. There are plenty of cases where the victim doesn't even want the defendant prosecuted, and prosecutors will continue on. That being said, the grandmother here, Ms. Patterson, I believe it was, she makes a rather eloquent argument that opponents of the death penalty make all the time. This will not make me whole. This will not honor my daughter's life and my grandchild's life and my son-in-law's life. This does nothing for me. So therefore, don't do this in my name. And that was a really strong statement that has to be taken into account.
Right. Great points by both of you guys. And I just want to make clear my objection to the death penalty is having been in the courts and seen how judges handle things differently and defense lawyers handle things differently and prosecutors handle things differently and how disparate it is I just don't trust the system enough to impose the ultimate penalty. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. All right, straight from Schenectady, New York, a police officer kneeling on a man's neck during an arrest. Let's put it into context. 911 was called that there was an individual slashing tires. When the police officer approached an individual that they believed may be the suspect, that individual took off and he went to the back of his house, where you're going to see some body cam video of the police officer taking him down literally at his house, and one of his relatives, it may be his father, are actually recording it and commenting as the officer is on his neck. Let's take a look.
Hi, what's your first name? What's your first name? Okay, what happened next door with the car?
What are you talking about?
What am I talking about? Okay, we have you on camera.
Bring your camera, show it to me.
Huh?
Bring
Okay.
your camera, show it to me.
All right, I'm going to, okay? I'm trying to talk to you about this first before going any
I
further.
understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about, okay, let me finish what I have to say, okay? We checked the neighbor's camera, okay, and you slashed their tires. Look at, yes, let me talk.
I slashed your tire?
Let me talk to you, okay?
I slashed.
Yes,
Okay.
let me talk to you, okay?
Go ahead.
We have it on camera. They don't want to press charges right now.
I don't care what they want to do because I don't know what you're talking about. So bring that camera and show it to me. Okay?
Okay, turn around. Put your hands behind your back. 35, start me a car.
Put my hand.
Yep,
What?
turn around. Put your hands behind your back.
Yeah, put my hand.
35 foot pursuit. Guy needs mail. Get here. Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
Why you
Hands
harassing me?
behind your back.
Yo, why
Hands
you
behind your
harassing
back.
me?
Hands behind your back.
Yo, why
Put your
you
hands behind your
harassing
back.
Why you harassing me?
Put your hands
What
behind
I
your
did?
back. Put your hands
What
behind
I
your
did?
back right now.
He put me
Stay
down.
back. Stay back.
He come here and harass me.
Stay back.
He
Put
say
your hands behind your back.
But tell him that here.
McBurney, put your hands behind your back.
But tell him
Call
bring the
police.
evidence. But tell him bring the evidence.
Put your hands behind your back.
Bring the evidence and show me. Bring the evidence and show it to me.
Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your fucking back. Ow! Back up. Back up.
Bring the evidence.
Put your hands behind your back.
Put
your hands behind your back.
What I did? I didn't do nothing. I didn't do nothing.
Put your hands behind your back. Get back inside now. Get back inside.
I didn't do
back
nothing.
Inside. Back up.
Yo, you video.
Back up.
Video him.
Back up.
You video him. Video him.
What did he do you?
Back up.
Back up for what?
Back up. Put your hand behind your back. Put your hand behind your back.
What I did.
Back up.
What I did.
Back up.
What I did.
Put your hand behind your back.
What I did.
Back up. Back up.
Okay, please.
Back up.
Back up for what?
Oh, my head.
Okay, so that's a vantage point of the body cam that the police officer had. We're going to show you another clip a little bit later on of a relative. So you're going to have actually both angles of this going on at the same time. So we saw what the officer was seeing. Professor, I know prior to showing this clip when we were off air, you said you have some very strong feelings about the case. So I'm just going to toss it to you. What are they?
Sure. So what we don't see here, there's a video, the body cam video is about 22 minutes long. And this police officer responded. He spoke to the victims. He spoke to other people in the neighborhood. And he actually, at some point, even explains to a neighbor, hey, I'm here for something else. I'm just looking around. He actually conducted himself in a rather professional manner. And he attempted to adjudicate this without making an arrest. The footage that we did see, he did attempt to speak with this gentleman. And there was a sense that he did not necessarily want to arrest him. Now, I want to be very clear, and this is very difficult for a lot of folks to hear, but it's the truth. This is a charge of criminal mischief. And once a police officer has probable cause to believe that a crime has been committed, he or she has the right to make an arrest. If you resist being handcuffed, that is resisting arrest. If you run away, that is resisting arrest. You don't have the right to have the police show you all the evidence that they have if they have probable cause to arrest you. Would it be a nice thing to do? Certainly, they can absolutely do so. So I just want to be clear that as far as the procedure leading up to the actual incident in that backyard, I do believe this police officer followed protocols. Now, there will be folks that will say, well, this was only a slashing of the tires, criminal mischief. This man shouldn't have been arrested or whatever the case. That's a job for the legislature. That is not the job of the police to make decisions as to what persons should be arrested. Once someone is under arrest, that's what lawyers are for and so forth. Now, the use of the knee on the neck, we've seen this before. We saw it in the Floyd case. We know how dangerous that is. I do not believe that this police officer was attempting to kill this man. I believe that he was attempting to effect an arrest. I think that it was a situation where he chased someone and it just things went too far. Does that mean he was right placing his knee on this man's neck? Absolutely not. But we saw the video, it was the heat of the moment, and that's not an excuse. That is more of an explanation. Is this a crime? It was perhaps against the department procedure, but I don't necessarily see it as a crime. And like I said, I think this police officer, if you watch the entire video, kind of went above and beyond to adjudicate this matter and for it not to be escalated into this point. It's just important that the public understand you cannot talk your way out of an arrest. You cannot elude the police. Once they have probable cause, that's what attorneys are for. You go to the police station and you work this out.
Latonia, to the professor's point, and I couldn't agree more, we have more and more of a thought process that's going out there. And I don't know, reform is great, but police do have to execute arrests, and they have the authority, and they don't have to show you the evidence. And a lot of these things escalate when there's flight and there's resisting. And as we'll see in another video, there's also other people lingering about. And you watch the cop as he's trying to gain control of the situation. What are your thoughts? Do you have any strong feelings about how the officer conducted himself, at least so far from what you saw on the body cam?
I think, so far you see him doing a regular interaction and trying to tell him why he's there, what's going on, and that's what happens. We've talked so much about police reform in this country, especially right now, but there's some things that no matter what you talk about with regard to reform, you can't take out the element of what happens when somebody is right there in the process of trying to deal with the situation. And I think that what Professor Burkhalter said is a very good point too, which is there's something to be said about police procedure. Sometimes somebody might violate what is a procedure, but that is not illegal because there is not a law against it. But most times there are laws against resisting arrest. And so the question becomes, as a part of reform, will it be that sometimes that you codify those things that are against procedure so that you do hold somebody accountable? But I think this officer did everything he could to kind of de-escalate.
Okay, so let's look, because we have the benefit of the other view of a family member taking a video shot of the same thing. So you saw the body cam one way, now you'll see it the other way. Let's take a look.
Back up. What did he do to you? Back up.
What I did? Back up.
Take off your foot on his head, I say.
Back up.
Hey, don't hit him.
Fucking back.
Don't worry. You're gonna get what you want.
Get back.
Get back, Will. This is my property.
I'm in the backyard.
Backyard?
Backyard. Get back. Get back.
Get back what? What he did? What he did?
Well, there you go. And it should be noted that the officer lost his radio during the encounter, I think actually before the actual putting him on the ground. And that's why he asked somebody to call 911 and was yelling to the cops that were responding, I'm in the backyard. Does that change your point of view at all, Professor? Because, again, he's got to try to put him in compliance. And he's also got people he's got to worry about who are getting agitated. This is what, in my mind, right or wrong, escalates the tension into some of these situations that can become problematic because the cops are in fear, too. And I know the refrain. Cops are trained not to be afraid. Cops are superhumans and they wear a cape and they should be perfect. But you know what? When you're really out there and the situation's unfolding the manner in which it is, and you got somebody that's not submitting to your lawful arrest, and you got other people that are out there yelling and screaming, I'm sorry, no amount of training in the world makes you not human. Thoughts?
Bob, I was, as you well know, I was with the police department for 20 years. And surprise, surprise, some people do not want to be arrested. And the question here is, what do you do if someone is not complying when you attempt to handcuff them? Police officers may use reasonable force. Sometimes we refer to it as necessary force. And it's not a pretty thing to watch. No one wants to injure someone, hurt someone. No one wants to be injured. But the question really is, what do you do?
Okay, Professor, I'm sorry, Latoni, I'm not going to be able to give you an opportunity to respond because we are unfortunately out of time. You guys had great commentary. Stick with us for the regular scheduled program. I'll be back tomorrow.